Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending where you are in the world, and welcome to day 3 of our MSD ASF Talks webinar. Today we have a great program ahead of us. I just want to quickly remind you about some of the previous events that we had. So today is day 3. We had in September and October already great sessions with representatives from FAO, from JAPFA, Vietnam operations. We had people from China and also from Germany talking about the ASF cases there, and also swine operations from Guatemala talking about biosecurity systems. So very interesting presentations. Make sure to check them out because they are available on demand as well. So let's talk about the day 3, which is today. Welcome again. My name is Fernando Chucid. I am the Director of Key Account Relationship at MSD Animal Health. And it's a great pleasure that we have a great lineup of speakers for this day 3. We will start. So we've broken down today's session in 2. So we will have like the first session. It's going to be about innovation and technology and how these new solutions are helping and can help producers to stay safe and prevent the occurrence of infectious disease and bad outbreaks happening. So we have 3 guest speakers that will be presenting their solutions. And after that, we will talk about the economic or finance part of the ASF and what these could represent for an operation or a country or even the world, right? We will have a great overview on the impact. So I also want to remind you to use the chat, the Q&A box, to ask the questions you may have during the presentations. And we will have, at the end of the final presentation, we have our Q&A session, and the presenters will be able to address those questions that you have. All right. So without further ado, we can start introducing our first speaker. We have Justin van Vuelt coming to talk about the use of technology, and he will introduce the concept that Distinct, the company he represents, is bringing to the market. Justin has more than a decade of experience in sales and marketing. He has a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture Business and a minor in Entrepreneurial Studies from Iowa State University. Justin, thank you very much for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Can everybody hear me okay?
We can hear you fine.
Okay, thanks, Fernando. Again, my name is Justin Van Wert, and I am the Director of Sales Operations and Customer Success at Distinct. I had about a 10-year career in the row crop equipment manufacturing space before hopping into the livestock space. I'm excited to talk to you all today about Distinct and how we are enabling precision livestock farming, and pertinent to today's discussion, some exciting projects to help enable response time for critical health events like ASF. I'll spend a little bit of time going through the background of Distinct, some of the opportunities that we see in the industry, how our solutions are paired to help address those issues, and then discuss a cool project that we have going on in conjunction with Iowa State University Vet Now and a top 40 producer in order to try and get eyes on animals remotely by a veterinarian with under an hour to help respond to critical health events like ASF. So firstly, some of the industry issues or observations. Our company started, our co-founder, BJ Brugman, spent about a decade in the animal pharmaceutical space, primarily in sales. And one of the observations that he had was related to the data available. As we all know, swine facilities across the world have a ton of pertinent information available, whether it be live haul trucks with the inventory information, health status, weight of the pigs, all the way to feed tickets, rations, amount of feed being delivered, and those sorts of things. There's a ton of data that largely is manually inputted today or put on paper records and lives in the barns. And a lot of times with that information, it becomes outdated very quickly. And those that are taking that information out of the barns and transposing into records available via the computer, there's a lot of manual labor-intensive tasks associated to that and human error that is introduced when that's transposed from the paper records into computer systems. And so largely because that information is outdated and we're uncertain of that because of the manual usage, that data does not get used fully. In addition, a lot of inefficiencies as it pertains to labor in terms of teams making rounds, thinking about service managers that potentially have 40 to 50 sites in which they are responsible for, with a lack of visibility to critical information associated to those sites. So instead of responding to event-based things as you would if you had real-time data, they're simply making rounds and missing out on response time to critical issues. And this all kind of boils down to the lack of rural connectivity here in the United States and around the world at these swine facilities, and ultimately what led us to starting out Distinct. So because the data is outdated, we're uncertain of it, as well as the lack of visibility caused by not having reliable connectivity at these sites is the genesis for what started Distinct. As you can see there at the top, a quote from a top 10 producer here in the US, real life of going a whole week without realizing a 2,200 death event that occurred at one of their facilities. And we're talking about lots and lots of money associated with these assets that are living in barns and a very reactionary protocol today because of the lack of visibility to the information that's available to us. And so the solution here at Distinct is we are a software platform for confined livestock. And what ultimately allows us to do that is we start at the base level. To enable precision technology across the swine industry, we first need to start with reliable single source connectivity that can handle the data transmission that we're trying to achieve of the key information coming out of the barn, both of the barn environment and of the assets in the barn. And so we deployed a network-enabled PLC gateway that is completely hardware agnostic. So that allows us to deploy any type and number of IoT devices to answer the questions specific to the enterprise that we are working with. That could be biosecurity information to understand timestamps of when people are at the facility, all the way to feed outage alerts and notifications, to also some of the health-related things associated with treatment records and mortality events. We deploy off-the-shelf IoT sensors to help answer those questions, and then aggregate that data in a customizable dashboard so that the individuals within the organization, whether it be a veterinarian, somebody in the feed system, or a barn worker, they have the pertinent information available to them associated to the sites in which they have responsibilities for. And that's really all about both data quality, taking away the manual paper records and replacing those with affordable IoT devices, and also the real-time aspect of that, having that available. Our sensors can be transmitting data up to every second if we need, and also on some of those that maybe aren't as necessary, as far as 30 minutes or so, transitioning that data into the cloud and into our dashboard, and really informing our team and driving the necessary resources to the right areas to respond to issues that we're seeing at these given sites. Now that we've talked a little bit about what Distinct does, here's Distinct in action, again in conjunction with Iowa State University and the VetNow telemedicine platform. We have gone out to a site here in Iowa where Distinct is based, and trying to solve for getting eyes on any pig in the U.S. in under an hour, with a veterinarian to assist with what's going on and get their eyes to coordinate with the on-site help to really see what's going on in the barn. And so through Distinct connectivity paired with the VetNow platform, we were able there, you can see in the picture, to get a veterinarian to assist and successfully train and execute necessary health-related tasks to the on-site staff. So thinking about things like ASF and trying to take care of biosecurity protocols, and being able to remotely have a veterinarian get eyes on what's happening in the facility, both from an environmental standpoint as well as with the pigs themselves. That's really what we were off to do with this project, and we're very successful in that effort. And so we will look to kind of expand this pilot, go out to more facilities, enabling the VetNow telemedicine platform, as well as some other more commercially available programs like Zoom and Skype, to utilize those to get veterinarians' eyes and ears in the barn remotely. And so very excited about that effort, and look forward to any questions that you may have about this specific effort or the Distinct platform in general. Again, thank you for your time, and I'll turn it back to you, Fernando.
All right. Thanks so much, Justin. Very interesting. I'm sure the public and our audience will have more questions going forward. I'd like now to introduce our next speaker, Felipe Araya. He'll be talking from Chile today. Felipe is an engineer, and he's been working mainly in the food and mining industries, implementing IoT systems and integrating the equipments and instruments to meet the need of their customers. And Felipe will talk now about the new technologies that he and his companies is bringing to the market. So Felipe, thank you very much for being with us today. We are excited to hear you. The floor is yours.
My name is Felipe. I am the thematic in Chile and the general manager for innovation and development. And I was invited to have this presentation today, which is trying to present a solution IoT that we developed some years ago for the porcine industry. And this solution permits today to control biosecurity, our environment, and to prevent or mitigate diseases such as the one that we are here today to discuss, ASF. To begin, a brief review of what is the origin of our solution. Our solution is called DBS, and it refers basically to the digitalization of biosecurity. It stems out of the needs of our client, Super, which is the main exporter and producer of meat, especially pig. In around 2015, they presented their protocol of biosecurity control, which basically it's a pyramid structure in which its farm is classified in different levels, and it groups according to the geographical zones of their farms. The system presents some rules and restrictions for people movement between farms, mainly because people are the main transmission source of these diseases. Restrictions depend on the level of zone, and this method or protocol that our customer uses from those years invites us to learn and understand the main risk factor that biosecurity has for the pig producer, especially for Aerosub, which is the movement of their employees. It has a series of people coming in and out of the farm, and they are in direct contact of animals. Therefore, their main preoccupation is to control the movement of these people and the way they come into their facilities. To date, they have around 17,000 people coming in and out to do several activities. And each one of these persons is a potential contamination source. And those years, they recorded the access manually. There was just with an ID and a paper record that was generated for each one of the people. This system of control permitted to get information of the entrance of each one of these people coming in. The challenge is to take this information that was done manually to a digital system in order to give the information to the users in real time for these users with a certain degree of analysis of the information. The presence or the actual, at that time, their system was almost impossible to process, to analyze, to get indicators that will help us to have a decision-making process. I think the presentations is out of phase, which shows the old system of control for the people coming in. We took this challenge, as I say, and we made this protocol digital by integrating two strong areas of our industry, automation, hardware, and software. We use several equipment that allowed us to identify, validate, and register the people at the moment of their way they're coming in, giving this if the system would allow us, the incumbents, and once this information was registered in the cloud, we process it, and then we put in indicators and links that to our user and client, allow them to have precise information and in real time to face some sanitary issues that could create a propagation of a higher level.
Our app and our solution seems to be simpler and cheaper, and it seeks to centralize and guide the user so that he can find results that are already included in the application. Its sole purpose is that of using information, allowing for a real-time analysis for quick responses, quick decisions, so as to have better response times, and also to control the entry and exit of individuals to the farm or facility. Maybe one of the advantages of our solution is a quarantine control that allows us to isolate certain sectors in the farm so as to contain a source of contagion. And all this is done on the web instantaneously, and it provides a blockage that keeps people who have been around the disease from going into a different farm in the future. And that created a very significant impact because the transmission levels were quite significantly reduced. This quarantine control system has many functions. In the last months, it has even allowed us to mitigate the COVID-19 virus effects. It has allowed us to isolate certain sectors in which some transmission of the disease has occurred. And it not only allows for the sanitary control of the animals, but also the sanitary control of the farm in general. The data that we have compiled countrywide were not enough, and we had to take a step forward, and we had to provide indicators, processed information. The indicators allowed users to make decisions in different aspects, and the indicators that we were able to obtain allowed us to create, during certain specific times, indicators on the number of entries or access of personnel to the farms, geographical indicators with the help of Google Maps, for example, indicators on the number of sanitary events that have occurred during a given period of time, the number of entries in the month of October, the number of entries that were rejected given whatever reason, that also allow us to have information which helps significantly reduce the number of attempts to violate biosecurity in any given farm. I think I have a problem with my video, but anyways, another example of what these indicators allow us to achieve is the following. We have customized indicators so that people can create their own task forces with the information that they have available. It has also allowed us to create digital forms that can be required from those who wish to have access to a given farm. So we were able to create digital forms so as to carry out polls, surveys, following up on certain events. And every time a person wants to access a facility, they are required to fill in one of these forms. And having done this, we were able to also have a record of the vaccination rate. That was very useful, and it allowed us to have an operating continuity. There was no need to close down because of the identification of a significant source of contagion. So to us, this is a simple solution, quite efficient, that has been implemented for almost 6 years now, and it has helped us face many situations in the recent past. Another example is the dissemination of information. We were able to broadcast a video a while ago, and if people had not watched the video in full, they were not allowed access to the farm. That was something that they had to do online, and it was a requirement that had to be completed by the staff. I have problem with my internet connection, but just to conclude, I'm going to say that this is a simple and efficient solution that has proven useful to mitigate and to mitigate the transmission of disease in animals. And the single purpose is to provide flexible tools, not just for pig farmers, but any farmer who deals with animal disease. Thank you, and I apologize for the difficulties with my connection. I hope you can understand, and I'll leave my information, my contact information, should you wish to contact me in the future. Thank you very much. Thank you, Felipe. That was an excellent presentation. There were no glitches. No, don't worry.
It's with great pleasure that I now introduce you to our next guest speaker, Rob Hannam. Rob is the Director of Business Development with Farm HealthGuardian, where he's a partner, and he will be talking about the solutions in regards to animal health and biosecurity that the software of Farm HealthGuardian offers. Rob is from Ontario, Canada, and he's spent his career in the agricultural industry and has worked for small and also large multinational companies, both in the US and Canada. Rob, thanks so much, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rob Hannam with Farm HealthGuardian. Thank you, Fernando. And thanks to MSD Animal Health for putting on this important discussion. At Farm HealthGuardian, we're improving animal health and welfare through digital technology. Like the other presenters, the other startups, we're all working towards the same goal: to help producers across the world reduce the risk of ASF and other diseases. What I'd like to share with you is an overview of Farm HealthGuardian. Now, we all know that diseases in swine mainly move either with the animals or with the people or the trucks that move between farms. And so that's why Farm HealthGuardian focuses on those three things. We focus on reducing the risk of movements of the pigs or the trucks that carry the pigs and feed trucks, but also the people. And our last presenters spoke a lot about the importance of knowing where the people are and where they may have been, and that's important to us as well. And I just wanted to mention, I was really interested to hear some new research that came out just in September from Dr. Machado at NC State. And it's really important, and it really jumped out at me because his research is based on, ASF in Latin America in a real life situation. And in every case, contact tracing was always the best method of control out of all the scenarios that he modeled in his research. So if you haven't yet seen Dr. Machado's research, I really encourage you to look it up. It's really interesting. And it really shows me that contact tracing is rather than quarantining a zone, is a very effective way to control ASF. And so it's important that we really learn from that research and try to implement that. Farm Health Guardian is a software platform. Our goal is to help producers, whether you've got 4 barns or 400 barns, we want to help you reduce disease pressure. And of course, that improves animal health and that lowers your cost of production. There's 2 tools within Farm Health Guardian. The first is called Farm Health Monitor. Farm Health Monitor is a centralized health record reporting system. It provides, mortality tracking, for example, at the pen, batch, or barn level. And it really works to improve communication between the worker in the barn, the veterinarian, and everyone in between. But the tool that I'd like to explain in more detail is Farm Health Protect. Farm Health Protect is a smart biosecurity management system. It helps producers simplify protocols and validate that your people, your workers and visitors, are following your biosecurity protocols that you've set out on your farm. A core part of Farm Health Protect is confidentially recording movement of people, trucks, on and off of the farm properties within your system or within your loop or your network. And this enables rapid contact tracing. So here's how it works. We use a system of creating a virtual perimeter around each farm property in your system or in your province or your state. And from there, we're able to connect the people and the trucks to the system. And there's several ways to do that. One way is through the mobile application. So the Farm Health Guardian app can be used by farm workers, the farm owner, the veterinarian, contractors, your electrician, your plumber, ventilation supplier. So everyone can be using the Farm Health Guardian app. But we also can connect trucks through GPS or through other GPS devices like our Farm Health Guardian Passport, which is a battery-powered GPS device that can go into any vehicle. And with those simple tools, we can monitor automatically and confidentially monitor the movement. And that gives you the information that you need. So when there is a disease outbreak, you're able to pull that information in within minutes and create a trace-out report. So our clients, our customers tell us that prior to using Farm Health Guardian, it would have taken hours or days to look at the visitor logbooks or to look at their truck GPS system. But with our mapping tools and trace-out tools, within minutes, they have information to make decisions. And then also they're able to immediately identify the people, vehicles, and farms that may be at risk of an outbreak. Speed matters in a disease outbreak, and we're helping provide a tool that gives producers and veterinarians the speed that they need to control the disease. We're, as Fernando mentioned, we're based in Canada, and we're looking to expand in North America and in other countries as well. Our system was launched 1 year ago on October 1st, 2020, and we've been operating with customers here in Canada. This is an example from a swine integrator. They have about 250 farms in their system using Farm Health Guardian for the past year. And they tell us that within 10 minutes, they can create a risk rank list of maps of the people, trucks, and farms that may be at risk if they suspect a disease. And then they can use the patented features of Farm Health Guardian to send notifications to those people and those farms who may be at risk and provide them with instructions right away. We were thrilled to be listed in the Maple Leaf Foods Sustainability Report. They're a food company based here in Canada that's been using the system. And they say, this system allows their team to impose movement restrictions or conduct traceouts in near real time, that saves hours of work. So time really matters in a disease outbreak. And I'd look forward to questions, Fernando, or from the audience to provide more information and share more about Farm Health Guardian and how technology can really help improve disease preparedness and reduce the risks that our farmers face. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rob. Thanks a lot for your presentation. Interesting. I'm sure we're gonna have questions for you, not a doubt. Okay, so that was our first half of the day with presentations around solutions for biosecurity in relation to the use of new technologies, right? And now next, we're going to switch gears to a different topic. Obviously, it's still very much related to the main core of our event here, which is ASF. And I have the pleasure to have Dr. Denis Di Pietre here with us today. Again, thanks so much, Denis. For those who don't know him, Denis Di Pietre is a consultant, and he's got extensive knowledge, having received his BSA and master's degree from the University of Arkansas and PhD from Iowa State University. And he's been working as a professor, researcher with many different institutions and companies, providing consultancy also. You can pretty much find him in whichever big event in the swine industry here in the US and also overseas. Happy to have you here, Denis. The floor is yours, and I'll talk to you next in our Q&A session. Hi, Denis. Real quick here, we can't see you nor hear you.
Okay, testing. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now, and we can see you too.
Did you lose my picture now, or can you still see me?
No, we can see you.
Okay, perfect. Sorry. Well, the principal economic damage that's done by African swine fever is that it's an export stopping disease in whatever country that it occurs in. And that includes exports to countries which already have it in their pig population. So export stops really to everywhere. The disease organism itself is not dangerous to humans, but that creates another problem in that early in an outbreak, human nature has shown in early outbreak situations in the countries which have broken with it in the last couple of years, that producers who suspect they might have it immediately try to sell their hogs and move them before they're condemned in order to save money. And so there are a lot of ways that it can get off to a very bad start just based on human nature and the way people try to save their economic situation. Probably the best study to date, which documents the potential cost to, at least to the United States, of an outbreak, is one produced in cooperation with Iowa State University and the University at Uruguay. And the study concluded that there are really two possible scenarios, or two likely scenarios, and they valued each one of those. And that is that we have a positive case, but we very quickly control it within 2 years and eliminate it, or a longer-term scenario where it becomes endemic and lasts for 10 years or more because it escapes into feral hogs and animals that move around in the open space and become very difficult to track down. So how important are exports to the United States? Well, in this last year, $7.7 billion were exported, about 6.56 billion pounds. That's 27% really of the total U.S. production went into export markets. So you can imagine if that were cut off, it would be a disaster. Almost $60 per head in sales is due to the export markets, so a substantial amount. Last year, we slaughtered about 131 million hogs with a value of $22 billion in farm revenue, and used about 1.1 billion bushels of corn, about 455 million bushels of soybeans. All of these things would be affected by export stoppage. The industry also is responsible for about 500,000 jobs throughout the U.S. economy. And so anything that damages it would certainly hurt employment. We have about 66,000 pork producers in the United States also. If you look at this picture, you can get an idea of the growth in exports that have happened in the U.S., as well as its share of global exports. If we look at the orange line that's on top, it's really the global share of exports of pork that the U.S. is responsible for. And you can see just a relatively short time ago, 1990, we were not net exporters of pork. But starting about 1994, we became net exporters and gradually took a tremendous amount of global share, so that when we get over to the current time, you'll see that we're somewhere near 30% of all exported pork comes out of the United States. Where does that pork go? Well, recently, a little over half of it has gone to Mexico, China about 9%, Japan about 2%, Brazil about 4%, and so on. So all of these countries would be affected by the inability to import. There really have been several studies since 2019 assessing the likelihood, but the one I want to bring to you today, because of the short time we have together, is this one by Iowa State and University of Uruguay, the ASF Impact Study. Like I mentioned, it looks at short and long-term effects in two scenarios, one where the disease is contained within 2 years. If that happens, at the moment that the first case is discovered, there would be a closing of all export markets for pork, including to those countries where ASF is still active. One thing I want to point out about that, though, in Europe and other places, nobody wants to be the person who reports the first one. So there's some cover-up that has happened in countries for sometimes extended periods of time where it can be covered up before it's actually confirmed. And all of that has to do with economic motives and fear, but it holds out the problem that the disease can get a foothold and spread before it's officially declared. What would happen in this study's judgment is that U.S. pork prices would fall 40 to 50%, and that would be required to clear the export pork into the domestic market. So we would be flooded with pork, and we would have to drop about 40 to 50% in price in order to absorb all the pigs that went into the export market previously. All of the meat markets then would be saturated with meat and protein, so it would not only affect the price of pork, but beef, poultry, lamb, and other prices would likely plunge because pork would be so cheap that it would attract the interest away from those and lower their price. It would also, of course, put downward pressure on U.S. corn and soybean prices. The U.S. now produces roughly 40% of the world corn supply, and livestock consumption is really not the biggest use in the United States. It's kind of interesting for people to see. We would expect losses in this short-term case of 2 years before it was contained and eliminated to be in the range of $15 billion in revenue to farmers, as well as some employment losses. But the authors felt like because of the short-time nature of it, we would not see a lot of downsizing in farms. They would just accept very large losses for a period of time and try to hang on until it was cleared. The total industry risks, or the total industry would probably only shrink very marginally, and again, with people accepting heavy losses instead. The second case is if the disease is, for instance, late in being detected, and then one of the ways you can see this, if you look at the data, the country data throughout Europe and China and other places, is that when you see the very first case in a country, and then within a couple of weeks you see dozens of cases. What you really are seeing there is probably people have ignored some dead animals that they've seen for a while, but once the actual declaration is out, then everything starts to get reported. So if there's concealment of the first deaths and of the disease, it could spread to feral swine and then move out into the countryside away from control situations, and that could produce a very long period of failure to be able to export. We go from 15 billion then to 50 billion in losses in the U.S. Now there would be downsizing in the U.S. pork industry, probably about 140 total jobs lost, and because of the concentration of pork production in Iowa, 22,000 of those would be there. The industry structurally would downsize after about 5 years and begin to try to seek out an equilibrium where domestic production itself could be sustained at a reasonable price without exports. You see really the three scenarios that we've listed here on U.S. pork production. The line which sort of goes straight up without falling and has a blue segment is what would happen if there was no ASF detected. The green line, which you see makes a temporary dip and then comes back up, is the case of the 2-year issue, and the red line with downsizing and structural decline of the industry is the red line. We see the same pattern then in prices. You would see a tremendous drop in prices that you'll notice in the middle of the screen on both the green and the red line. And then the green line representing the 2-year scenario would bounce back relatively quickly and come back to normal equilibrium. But if we did have the long-term or 10-year scenario, we could expect prices to follow this red line, and the losses and the revenue losses would be huge. So we can take a look at the published literature. Where is it likely to come from if it enters this North America, South America, Central America in a new way? I realize it's been around before, but in a new way. How will it get here, and where will it enter? There is a study, which is a meta-study. That is, these authors took everything they could find published on African swine fever. They also included foot and mouth and classical swine fever. and they looked at what are the likely vectors by which the diseases enter countries where they're not present now. How do they get here, and what are the dangers that we have to protect against? In the review of all the studies, they found for a U.S. infection, the most likely cited countries where it would come from are listed here in order. So it's believed that somehow it would wind up here from Asia as the most likely candidate. Canada would be next, followed by Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, and then from Europe and Russia, as well as the United Kingdom. So there are a lot of ways that it could come in. We're going to take a look at that. And you can imagine this country list in terms of the many ways that it can invade the country. We might call these pathways of entry, and these are the ones most frequently listed in the studies. Legal and illegal importation of live animals and meat. I have myself traveled extensively globally, and I can tell you that I usually stop in at the agricultural inspection station when I re-enter the country, and I can't tell you the number of times I've seen open suitcases from people, U.S. from other countries, that have raw meat unwrapped and laying there. In other words, they've been discovered by importation. But if you talk to Customs and Border Patrol, they believe they actually catch 50% or less of those attempts. Although I can say that there's been a concerted effort to step up the resources and awareness associated with that in the last 2 years. The legal and illegal importation of feed ingredients, feed and feed products is considered to be a very dangerous and possible route for entry into the U.S. The legal and illegal importation of genetics, and here primarily we mean semen, because the live animals are listed there in number 1. Then bioterrorism, where someone deliberately infects the U.S. herd in order to inflict economic damage on our society. There could be, of course, cross-border movement from wild and feral hogs, and this is especially dangerous along the southern border because we have a tremendous migration process underway right now, and they could be driving javelina and feral hogs, which live in the warmer southern regions, and cross, of course, the border with Mexico frequently and come back and forth. There could be some pressure to drive them north, and if any of those should wind up being infected in Mexico, the movement of people through the wild places could drive them north. We know that a lot of the immigration is trying to bypass normal ports of entry, and so they're out in the wild part of the deserts and so forth, where the feral hogs and wild boars, javelina, and so forth are. So driving them north is a problem. We also see some particular dangers from the outbreak in the Dominican Republic, which quickly moved to Haiti. And now we have really thousands of Haitian refugees coming into Colombia and then coming up the Isthmus of Panama and through Central America and Mexico. And it's most likely that they would be bringing food with them, at least initially. More than likely, by the time they make that long trip, if they brought contaminated meat or dried meat products, most of those might be already used up. But it could cause a contamination in Central and South America too, or an infection in wild and feral hogs in those areas. The cross-border movement of livestock trucks, which happens in Canada and Mexico, are also a big vector. The speakers before me talked about the need to monitor those and have systems, or technological systems, to monitor those closely. And then, of course, we have other fomites like contaminated shoes and clothing and supplies, all possible pathways of entry. If you look at the most likely entry points into the U.S. By state, these are the ones that are listed. California, which would be the entry from Asia primarily. Florida, which would be the entry from either Mexico, Central America, Dominican Republic, Haiti. There are big populations of those citizens in southern Florida, and there's a lot of movement of visiting and relatives coming by and so forth to visit. Iowa and Minnesota are important entry points because animals are trucked from places of production that are far away from Iowa into Iowa, and traveling along, making a long trip and passing through and getting exposed to the disease and winding up in the many slaughterhouses in Iowa and Minnesota. That's primarily why they're high on the list. They have not only a large number of pigs, but the largest numbers of slaughterhouses and feed mills and related infrastructure that can become contaminated easily. Puerto Rico, of course, very close to Dominican Republic and Haiti. And the people of Puerto Rico are American citizens, so they can easily and freely travel to the U.S. Entry through Texas, again, through migration. Wisconsin, New Jersey, and North Carolina are listed because they have large airports, like Wisconsin, Illinois has O'Hare in that area, New Jersey, New York, EWN, which is New Jersey's airport, and the JFK airport in New York sees lots of visitors from countries where ASF is still a problem. And North Carolina receives shipments of feed from South America, as well as it's a huge reservoir, as you know, of sow farms. We can take a look at the EU as a model. In fact, my business partner, Lance Mulberry, he's an economist, and I have, for the last 5 years, been using a bioeconomic model, an epidemiological model with the economics included, to look at the spread of ASF in a predictive way in the EU. And we have actually produced this model with the tools of artificial intelligence, and the model creates a forecast of risk for each of the over 300 county regions of Europe. They're called NUTS regions, N-U-T-S. We looked at the NUTS 2 level and have created a forecast for each one of those to show how the disease might spread. We also used over 210 variables in the model from European data, which included everything from intra-Europe travel, from regions like Romania, where ASF is present, visiting relatives in France, bringing along special treats of food. The European Union, for instance, values free travel and free association as a core value. And so they're very reluctant to cause checkpoints at borders. And so there is a relatively free movement of people and products in the region. And so we used density of farms, density of slaughterhouses, really over 210 variables in the model. This is a picture of the density of wild boar in Europe. And the source of this is probably maybe the highest expert on ASF internationally, Dr. Sanchez Vinscano, who is at the University of Madrid. He has used this map to show one of the principal vectors, the movement of boars and densities. And you can kind of lay that over where the pigs are, which is on the next map. And you can see a lot of the pigs in Europe are grown near the ocean to export to other regions. And so we have a lot of pigs in, of course, in the Netherlands and in the Normandy area of France, the little part that's sticking out there. and certainly in Catalonia, as well as in Germany and Poland. You see a concentration up there, and Denmark is almost completely black with pigs. So we have an intersection of these carriers of the disease with large densities of pigs in the EU. So our particular model used these kinds of variables. I won't go over them. We've kind of mentioned some of them. This is just a summary list. We actually used, like I mentioned, over 200 variables to create the models. So each of the nuts regions is then evaluated for its risk. And the map I'm going to show you next shows the top 100 risk areas. This, by the way, was done before the first case was discovered in Germany, because we were trying to predict when the first case would be discovered in Germany. And so we began about 3 years ago. And so what you're going to see are these areas, which are in Poland, are the highest 5 at-risk places. This was April in the year 2020, the year it was discovered in Germany. And now I'm going to add 5 of these counties each time that represent the 5 next most risky places that it might come. And you'll see the relative color change when we do this, because when you put 10 counties up there now, they're resorted by the level of risk according to all of them. Now, it's kind of interesting. You'll notice that they are not all continuous or contiguous. That is, they're not, we jump across the sea up there into the Scandinavian countries, and you might be surprised at the number of pigs that are grown near the ocean in Scandinavia, and there is a very strong ferry traffic which runs between mainland Europe and Scandinavia, and that's the same thing down below there in the Adriatic. Really, the issue there is one probably primarily of receiving ASF through either passengers or some kind of offhaul from ferries that run in those regions. So we can add the next group. You see the model basically was able to kind of show how it, what the likelihood of spreading might be. The greener it is, the less likely. The red and orange, the more likely. And you see, even though there are a lot of mountains at the northern part of Italy, there is a passageway through there easily for boars and animal traffic to go down into central Italy, and they've, of course, had problems there in the past. Okay, I filled in the entire map with its risk profile. And if you see where that arrow is pointing on the map, this is the county in Germany where we predicted that the first case would happen. We predicted that it would happen in August of 2020. It actually occurred 1 month later and about 40 miles away from the point, 40 miles north away from the point where we predicted the first case would be discovered. Now, keep in mind, there were probably many cases before the first case was discovered, but we were really forecasting discovered cases because we were using the data set of the OIE, and of course they only have ones that are reported or discovered. So what are some of the lessons in Europe? Well, one thing is topography is really critical to understanding spread. And you see the mountain regions, especially if you look at that kind of circular set of mountains, the Carpathian Mountains, the mountains of northern Italy, the Alps and so on. You see kind of a basin in that circle. And I'll show you in the middle how reported sightings or confirmed cases of ASF have kind of spread. This map is a map of Russia and Europe, but it's kind of at an angle that you have to get used to see how the projection is. All of the blue dots represent discoveries in wild boars, and the red dots are commercial farms where ASF has occurred. If you look at the red dots crossing Russia, You'll see a cluster of them in central Russia, and then moving a few just to the right. These are cases which occurred along a major rail line transporting grain and feed products from that central cluster, which is a big agricultural grain town, along the way to elevators and farms, in fact, probably all the way to the Asian area. So here's a look at the Russian rail system. Now we look a little more closely just at Europe, and one of the things I want you to especially notice is, if you can see this, I'll back it up here a bit, but the orange lines are the major rivers. And so I want you to notice how, especially the wild boar, are proliferating in cases along rivers, because as you know, as you drive through the country, typically you'll find trees, even if there are no trees or not many trees in the area, there will tend to be trees along the river because there's plenty of water and creeks. It doesn't have to be a major river. And the animals find shelter there as well as water. If you look at, excuse me. Okay, we can look at more rivers, and then the circles that you see in the middle are a bunch of lakes and forested area. So you really see a proliferation along river systems, and you see cases being blocked out by mountain ranges, at least temporarily until there's some way to surmount them. The seasonal transmission rates in Europe, you'll notice that where most of the cases proliferate are in the summer months. And then we have a real drawdown in cases in the winter. And partially that's because in the winter months, the wild boar kind of huddle down and don't travel as far. And in the summertime, they're up and around and looking for food, and they're also being hunted. And so there's a lot more movement and proliferation of the disease in the summer months. Once the entry is made into the country, what you're looking at here are each increase in the line represents entry into a new country. So if you start at the far left, I think these are the first reported cases since 2007 in Georgia. And then the first jump up is from Georgia to Russia. And notice the long flat line where it was in Russia. But then suddenly it jumps into Europe or into Eastern Europe. And the pattern that you're seeing as it jumps up into new countries is that once it occurs in a contiguous region, the spread of it tends to become exponential. At first, it's slow and linear, but once it gets a foothold, it tends to spread in a more exponential way, especially if it's passing through wild boars. The pattern of growth in total cases has a similar look. So if you look at not just new countries or individual countries, but if you look at all the cases in Europe, you'll see that once it gains a foothold, the expansion of the disease tends to be exponential. And then lastly, we can look at the average number of cases in each European country. So what you're looking at here is another, I have to get to where I can see it a little bit better. You're seeing that the average number of cases once it enters a country tends to stabilize, but then frequently it will escalate, typically maybe in a summer month when the boars are moving around, or during the mast when acorns are available and they're traveling to find food. And then we have an exponential rise within country until there's sort of a stabilization. Now, this is cumulative, so you need to understand it in that way. This is kind of a key event. It's when it moves into countries with higher wild pig populations, what happened was there was an exponential spread of the disease in Europe. So we're trying to learn all these things for what may eventually happen in the U.S. Now, we're currently building a prototype model of entry into the U.S. and how it might spread and what the economic damage might be, because we're pretty convinced that the place that it enters is going to determine whether it's a 2 or a 5 or a 10-year kind of problem. So we're animating the entry into various areas of the United States. Right now we're modeling entry into California, entry into Texas, entry into Florida, and entry into New York, the New York area. And I had some animations to show you, but they don't unfortunately work with the current technology that we're displaying on. So we'll have to stop there. I'll just see if it's available. I don't think we're going to get it to work, but we can try. No, okay. So this map was going to fill up, unfortunately, with color-coded counties to show how it distributes itself once it enters the country, but our technology has a mismatch, unfortunately, with our projection devices. So you'll have to wait and see that at another time. And I'm actually right out of time. So thank you very much for your attention. And remember, 15 billion for a 2-year case, 50 billion, and downsizing of the industry if we get it endemic in feral swine and javelina and wild boar populations in the U.S., which are primarily in the southern tier states. Fernando, thank you.
Hey, Dennis, thank you. Thank you so much. There's a lot of information, a little bit scary one, I have to say. But I think, you know, the reason for all these studies is for preparedness, right? And thanks so much for your work and for the talk here. So I would like now to invite all the speakers to be with me now for the Q&A session. We've got some questions already here that came in. I would like to remind our audience to continue sending these questions, and still have time, so we will address these questions now. All the speakers can have their cameras on. Thank you very much. And I'll start with you, Dennis, first, because I think it's fresher for everyone. You just spoke, so there's a question here in terms of something that you've mentioned in regards to how prepared maybe US is to prevent outbreaks. The question is if you think there is enough training for coordination between and budget for the government agencies to monitor and to prevent ASF occurrences in the US. And if the answer is no, then what can be done to address it?
Yes. Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, we are.
Okay, I had a signal that my microphone might have stopped working, but good. You know, there's been a tremendous influx of investment at the federal, state, and university level, really, to try to set up a national network, really, of regionalization, of increased inspection, of understanding how to kind of wall off areas of the country if a case may appear. And I think everybody is pretty much ready. I don't think, of course, additional resources are always welcome. I think the biggest additional resources that would make the best investment would be in more ability to check incoming luggage and imported goods. Again, I know many of you travel internationally, but when I return to the U.S., sometimes the entry hall has literally thousands of people in it. And in interest of just trying to move the crowd through, a lot of it isn't able to be inspected from a practical point of view, or we would hold up everybody for 3 or 4 hours. They have the dogs that sniff and that sort of thing, but More resources really at the key potential entry points, and more technology to try to sniff out any kind of meat or contaminated products, either in imported materials or otherwise. One of the kind of fascinating ways, for instance, I was talking about before, that human nature works in this, in countries where the animals are going to be condemned and lose all of their value, sometimes they're slaughtered and kept, and because there isn't an effect on humans, it's not considered immoral by them to send it into the food supply. So we have seen some contaminated pork, which can be bought in certain areas of the world where the disease is there, selling very cheap, and then it's exported to the same ethnic communities in other continents and sold at a very low price. So you have this problem in that it isn't a zoonotic disease. There is a lot of incentive by people who don't understand the big picture and the huge destruction it could have in the industry to try to save their own business or their own hide or make some money out of the deal. So stopping that is going to be, I think, the most important thing to do. More resources, yes, more resources on that front. Because we see the private sector responding dramatically, as you see the speakers today are already launching biosecurity and tracking technologies that are going to become very important in putting a kind of a biofence, a geofence and a biofence around regions and control people, traffic, and other contamination sources.
Okay. Thank you, Dennis. I have another one here for you, Rob. The question is if Wi-Fi is needed for the app, or can cell phone work with to upload the information? And also, if Wi-Fi is needed, will the data upload automatically once back on Wi-Fi?
Okay, great. I can answer a few of those questions, Fernando, and I'd be happy to speak with people separately to go into more detail. But just to follow up on Dennis's comment, like my impression is that there's a lot of planning going on right now. And those are biosecurity plans, the secure pork plan. In Canada here, we have the pig traceability system that's mandatory, and that's getting better and faster. So there's a lot of planning, but implementing those plans is a different story. And so I think we all need to be running a simulation or testing our systems or treating it as real life, not just a paper-based plan. So that's my 2 cents on where, things should be moving next on ASF. I see lots of interest now. I see lots of planning. Let's make sure we can all implement the day we need to. On our system, there's a question, can the app be tracked? Can the phone be tracked if people aren't on the app? No, it's only if you in our system, and perhaps with Distinct or others, but with our system, you have to use the Farm Health Guardian app, and then you're on the system, because privacy is very important here as well. So we have a privacy promise to our customers, and there's 3 privacy settings within the app so they can choose how they want to use the system. Your question about Wi-Fi, it can work on Wi-Fi, it can work on cell towers, but we all know that farm areas don't always have good cell reception. And so it will still work, but it's best if the farm has a booster, so some kind of a booster system. And maybe Justin, you could talk about that. What about connectivity on farms? So it works on Wi-Fi, it works on your cell phone tower, but what about in rural areas? Do you need a booster?
Yeah, good question, Rob. So with the Distinct system in particular, so our PLC gateway does have an internal cellular radio. Dependent on coverage map areas, it has the ability to have up to 2 different SIM cards, so kind of a backup as well. But then in addition to that, radio, that cellular radio internal to the PLC gateway, we are boosting that signal. So we're locking on to towers up to 50 miles away. And in very, typically we joke a lot that our customers aren't sending us to places around big metropolitan centers to test out our system. We're in very rural, close to remote areas, and haven't been stumped yet from a connectivity standpoint. So that's really our target, is making sure not only do we have some sort of signal, but definitely very reliable for data streaming, both with the sensor technology and then, as we stated, for some of that streaming data transmission for some remote capability as well for video and that sort of thing.
Thanks, Justin. Justin, since you're here, there's a question here in terms of the video technology. How do you envision video visits and with other technologies such as site diagnostics or guided postmortem? What else would this tool be used for? How do you envision the use of this video applications?
Yeah, I think the world is our oyster in terms of that. We've worked hand in hand with some specific telemedicine sort of apps specifically, but as I kind of stated in the presentation, our view is to be completely agnostic and open to all. And I think as we treat ASF response and that sort of thing, I think it's key for all of us to be working together to make sure that we can respond in a timely manner. And so not only, the telemedicine specific platforms that are out there, but we're also testing with the things that are commercially available today in terms of video streaming like Zoom, FaceTime, enabling Skype, and those sorts of things in all manners, not specifically to just vets getting eyes on pigs, but any sort of area in which we want to remotely get some sort of access into the site. That's where we see that going, to get eyes and ears on what's actually happening in the facility without having to compromise biosecurity protocols by bringing somebody there to the site.
Great. Thanks. Dennis, we have another one here for you. The question is around your models, right? Your scenarios, and it's related to the vaccines. As we know, there are no vaccines, at least not yet, right? Developed for ASF. But did you consider if there is a vaccine available in that scenario for the financial impact on your studies?
No, and that does need to be considered, but I would also warn you that there are many reasons why even an effective vaccination may not be an instant cure for the problem. One is, of course, not every pig gets vaccinated, right? We know that some pigs are missed. We also know that even if every pig was vaccinated, we have vaccine failure and vaccine breakthrough. We also have to wonder or acknowledge that countries which are buying pork from Mexico or the U.S. or in this hemisphere, they have to decide that they're not going to be contaminated with ASF. So they may say, well, okay, you're vaccinating, but you're vaccinating because there's still a problem. And, we might have to go through a period of vaccination until we were sure there was elimination, and then stop vaccinating and become totally free and demonstrated to be free before the process could really work. Now, where a vaccine may be very helpful is it could stop the explosion of the disease if it happened to get into a large system that had many tentacles out in terms of trucking and everything. But as far as opening back up export markets, I don't think it would really help. I noticed the same question about the fact that Mexican and other authorities in Central America were exchanging food with people, and that needs to be done, and it's an excellent thing to do. But keep in mind that people are trying to avoid the authorities. So they're not coming out and, if you have a caravan that's coming down a road, it's easy then to switch out food. But when you have people running off the road and hiding in the forest and crossing rivers and trying to stay away from, attack and police and brutality on the way, they don't get their food exchanged. So those are important things to do, but they're not fail-safes.
Yeah, and there's a follow-up question on that too. Considering if there's an outbreak in a country, and there are follow-ups and implementation of proper measures, right, to deal with it, how long can you expect the country will be able to export meat again?
Well, in the study, the one fairly good study that we have, that would fit into a short-term scenario, and they were guessing about 2 years. And the way that it remains contained is if it is contained primarily to commercial farms. Once it actually jumps into wild pig or feral pig populations and they run out into the countryside, then the cleanup becomes much more difficult. So 2 years would be the short time frame, primarily if it is a single case or a case in a very demarcated region that was able to be contained very adequately. But if it gets into Texas and into javelina and wild feral animals, or the problem is going to then be a longer term one.
So better to prevent.
Better to prevent completely.
Yeah. I think we're getting...
I would say one last thing on that.
Sure.
In our model of Europe, as soon as there was a case in Germany, fencing went up, and between Poland and Germany. And we did try to model the additional impact of that resistance of the movement of the boars due to fencing. But as you know, you can't fence across highways, and they don't put up barriers in the highways right now, at least. So wild boar in Europe are very cagey at the ability to move through and past the fences.
Thanks, Dennis. We're coming to the end of our time now. Justin, Rob, or Dennis, if you have any last remarks you wanna make, please feel free to give a quick remark here.
Great, it's Rob. I'll jump in. So this is an important topic. Thanks to MSD for putting this on. When I think of these, the best practices to contain or to prevent ASF, those apply to other diseases as well. So whether it's PED or PRRS or many other diseases I've learned a lot about in the past year, the systems and tools that you can use to improve your operation or protect it or reduce your risk of ASF, they work every day as well for PRRS, even if we don't end up getting ASF here. So I'd really recommend that people explore, it's got to be a multi-prong approach of different tools and practices to improve the their operation. So I would do more because it's going to help in your everyday business too.
Thanks, Justin. Any thoughts to close the day or night?
Yeah, no, just want to say thanks to MSD for hosting this. This is an important topic, as Rob and Dennis have highlighted here, and appreciate you having the medium for us to jump on and share what we're working on. So thank you very much.
Sure.
I would add my thanks also to MSD for having us in today. I would say I remain very optimistic that we can keep it out, but I will say that the appearance of it in Dominican Republic and the escalation and the migration from around the world, I think if we had not had COVID, which has dramatically slowed airline travel, although it's picking back up, of course, now, I think there would have been a much more highly likelihood that we would have already had a first case. But COVID, I think, has suppressed travel, international travel, but we do have now the presence of it in our hemisphere, and also this issue of uncontained movement of people, both in Europe, which, there's still a lot of mass migration in Europe, and it's through the woods and along roadways, and it drives animals in the forest in front of it. And some of that same thing can happen here. So we have substantial risks, but I remain fairly optimistic.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all the speakers, Rob, Justin, Dennis, Felipe, too. Thank you so much for all the great insights and information you've brought for us, for our audience today. And I'd just like to close today also with a remark about our fourth and final session with the ASF Talks. It's going to be on December 1st, same time, and we will have a very interesting day with the presence of Professor Jose Manuel Sanchez Vizcaino, leading a roundtable with representatives from swine industry from LATAM region. We're going to have representatives from Mexico, also from Colombia, and other countries, with a very interesting roundtable discussing, the outlook for ASF here in the region in Americas, specifically Latin America, due to the recent outbreaks, but also with an overview on other parts of the world as well. So don't miss it. We count on you, and I'll see you on December 1st. Bye now.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks.